Oh, Silent Hill Origins. As a bit of background, this was the first Silent Hill game to be outsourced to a different company,
which was Climax, and was originally intended to be a PSP exclusive.
Of course, with just about all PSP exclusives, that fell through and it was eventually ported to the PS2.
But before then, a demo for the PSP version was leaked, and I played it. I didn't have very high expectations, but I generally liked it. At the time, I thought this was a side game and that Silent Hill 5 was probably being developed by Team Silent, so I wasn't too worried about it. I figured just take it for what it is, a fun little side game on a minor little system. And after Silent Hill 4, as much as I liked it, a game with a more classic Silent Hill feel was kind of refreshing.
Then it was released on PS2, and at that point I was forced to take it more seriously. And I'm sorry to say that after playing the whole thing, I'm not really a fan of this game, but here goes.
Travis, you messed up son of a bitch.
You play as Travis Grady, a trucker of all things, who has taken a detour through Silent Hill on his way to make a delivery in Brahms,
which is a neighboring town you may have heard mentioned in other games.
Sybil Bennett. I'm a police officer from Brahms, the next town over.
When I decided to move east, I was looking at a job in Brahms, working with the police.
But it's interrupted when he meets Alessa and chaos ensues.
Hey, come back!
See, this game takes place before the original Silent Hill game, during the events that led up to Silent Hill, which would place it at about 7 years before the events of Silent Hill. You may notice that there's a 0 in the title instead of an O.
So it's really Silent Hill 0rigins.
In Japan, they just called it Silent Hill 0.
Now, as far as gameplay is concerned, I'm really not a fan of this game.
A lot of people like to tell me that the Silent Hill games always had clunky controls, but I never had a problem with them before this one.
Then again, this game is pretty unforgiving toward button mashers like me, so maybe that's the problem. Hey, I never claimed to be a hardcore gamer, alright?
But I played it recently, and I had a lot of trouble simply stomping on nurses after getting them to fall, which wasn't a big deal in the earlier games, so there's a hit detection problem here in my opinion, but whatever. Just so you know, I didn't have the patience to play very far into this game again to get the footage, so most of the game footage you're gonna see here is not me playing. I will mention in the credits where I got it.
I did play this game all the way through and beat it once, but it was a pain in the ass.
There are no difficulty options, so you're stuck with what the game gives you, for better or for worse.
And I ended up going through the game with very low health. The problem is that you get plenty of melee weapons,
but they all break, so fighting enemies isn't always the best option. But Travis gets tired easily, so running away isn't always an option either.
This game is just too combat heavy for me. Personally, if I'm too focused on strategy, it takes away from the horror aspect, and I may as well not even be playing a horror game.
And there is one aspect that is really silly. I think this is in response to complaints people had about Silent Hill 4's limited inventory. Travis can pick up a ridiculous number of large objects and just carry them around with him somehow. By the end of the game, you could have like 10 portable TVs and 15 toasters.
Where the hell does he keep them? His jacket's not that puffy.
What'd you do, jump ship? Huh? Well, what's with the life preserver?
Though it is pretty funny seeing Travis chuck a portable TV or a toaster at a monster. Said monster getting totally beamed by it and falling over. Maybe Angela had the right idea.
Speaking of the monsters, they don't make a lot of sense, and they don't allude to the big reveal as much as they should.
Take the fact that we have sexy faceless nurses and a monster that looks like two people screwing.
Monsters that allude to sex. That sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? James was sexually repressed because his wife was terminally ill. What's Travis's reason again?
Guess I just don't meet the right girls, bud.
Really? That's all? Suck it up, Travis. If I didn't know any better, I might think they had these sorts of monsters purely as a nod to Silent Hill 2.
Other than that, we have reanimated Brokill, because he's a trucker who feels bad about having accidentally killed some animals, I guess, and 2 Shakespearean-inspired monsters because of a play that Alessa saw. Though I have to admit that her reaction to the boss version of Caliban after Travis kills it is adorable.
Really, the only monsters that relate directly to Travis's story that aren't bosses are the remnants.
The straitjackets, again, they look awfully familiar, and the nurses.
I know I'm counting the nurses twice, but there is a legitimate reason for their presence, just not their appearance. So they're only semi-appropriate.
And the same goes for the butcher, really. I can see the symbolism if you get the bad ending, but if you get the good one, he's pretty inconsequential as far as the story is concerned.
I'm sorry, but he's just a thinly veiled Pyramid Head clone. Could be worse, though, which I'll get to later.
Other than the fighting, there's one major gameplay element that is different with this one. Thanks to Alessa basically giving it to you, you get the ability to switch between the foggy world and the other world.
I'm seeing things. This ain't right.
It gives you an interesting strategy for solving puzzles, and it makes you more comfortable in the other world in general because you know you can get out of it at any time.
Unfortunately, that's a bad thing.
The whole point of the other world is that it reminds you that no matter how bad your situation was to begin with, it can always get worse.
Oh, hell.
You're supposed to feel trapped, and being able to switch between realms at will, like Raziel, kinda kills that feeling.
So it's an interesting idea to play with, but kind of a failed experiment.
Graphics-wise, this game looks okay on the PS2. Not as good as Silent Hill 3 or 4, but since this one was originally made for PSP and they had to upgrade the graphics and essentially remake it, maybe they were short on time or something, I'll give it a pass on this one. The noise effect is kind of annoying though. It looks like black Rice Krispies jumping around on your screen. Of course, this is because it was made for a 4-inch screen, but if they were updating the graphics anyway, I don't know why they couldn't change the noise effect while they were at it.
Story-wise, this game is also okay.
Someone's in there.
The short version is that Travis runs into Alessa, who lures him into her situation to help her through it.
Safe now.
And in return, she forces him to face his own demons.
Daddy,
So in the end, it's mutually beneficial, even if Travis doesn't see it that way at the time.
when do we get to look inside your sick little mind?
Funny thing about this story is that to me, it kind of plays out as pretty good fan fiction.
Like, if this story didn't exist in game form and I read it as some Silent Hill fan's original story,
I'd think, hey, that's not bad as fan fiction goes.
seriously, can't you just imagine some young Silent Hill fan going, I think I'll write the story of what all happens when Alessa was burned and how she created Cheryl before going into that hibernation state. Then they decide to have the story take place from the point of view of a Mary Sue.
Come on, Travis is totally a Mary Sue.
Look, he's got a special power who no one else besides Alessa has. He meets all the characters from the first game that Harry met. But everyone knows the main character for reasons that aren't really made very clear.
No! You know who's in there!
You have a habit of popping up where you're not wanted, Mr. Grady.
And he impacts the story despite him never being mentioned in later games. Yeah, I don't remember Heather saying,
Thanks, Dad. But I do have just a trace of one more memory left. I haven't forgotten my sweet and gentle mother. Oh yeah, and that Travis guy, he was pretty cool. Lisa Garland is just all over him for no particular reason. I guess this is because she embraced Harry in the first game. I always thought it was because she was desperately scared and alone and was relieved to see another human being. I guess I was wrong, because apparently she just goes around glomping random strangers all the time.
it's a Silent Hill thing, you wouldn't understand.
Speaking of Lisa, they also randomly pair off two characters who had no business ever being in a physical relationship, which is another one of those annoying fanfiction staples.
Why?
How does this somehow lead to the events of Silent Hill? Kaufman got her hooked on drugs so he could force her to keep working for him and take care of Alessa.
How does adding "oh, and they fucked that one time" add anything to the story other than some very mild shock value?
Seriously, I don't know which game is more cruel to this character, Silent Hill 3 or Silent Hill Origins.
I could be a star!
The only character from the first game that I feel they really do justice to, despite his random fling with Lisa, is Dr. Kaufman.
Time to put her pawn to sleep. Good night.
He just comes off so cold and creepy.
Isn't it time you left town?
I can't.
Try harder.
I can firmly believe that he's the monster who did what he did to Alessa. Boy, does he ever deserve what's coming to him 7 years down the road.
For whatever it's worth, I do like Travis.
He has that likable everyman quality that a Silent Hill protagonist needs, and it works. I'll admit it, I don't even really have a reason. I just like the guy.
Come out. I've got your thing for you.
His story's pretty compelling. Basically, when he was a child, his mother went clinically insane and tried to kill him, and then was committed.
I'm not dead. Locked away. Out of sight, out of mind, not dead.
Then eventually his father committed suicide, leaving poor Travis to find the body.
Daddy, wake up. Please, Daddy.
I'm not sleeping, son.
Daddy.
You knew I wasn't sleeping.
Of course, he suppressed these memories and is confronted with them years later when he visits Silent Hill.
Dad, how could he do that to himself?
Yikes. Although when compared to the paths of similar main characters like James, Heather, and Walter Sullivan, his story seems a bit weak.
Don't get me wrong, it's a sad and terrible story, but I don't think it quite reaches Silent Hill levels of sad and terrible.
And while I complain about the monster designs in this game, I do think that two of the bosses, namely the memories of Travis's parents, are pretty damn cool and horrifying.
So what it comes down to is that nothing much was added to Alessa's story, and Travis's story isn't quite compelling enough to stand on its own.
With chasing Alessa around and Dahlia and Kaufman popping up from time to time to say cryptic things, along with monsters that were taken almost straight from Silent Hill 2, including a Pyramid Head clone, even if his design is pretty cool, along with the fact that the game doesn't have that much to offer on its own,
it basically comes across like Silent Hill 1 and 2 light. It's not offensively bad, but it's not great either. It's just a little too safe and kind of unnecessary. And that's my take on Silent Hill Origins.
Time you faced up to what happened. Your mother and I will see you in heaven, son.